Good morning, everyone. We have a big program this morning, so we're going to start on time. Sometimes we give a little more leeway than we're going to give this morning. I want to welcome everybody. The beautiful Sound Shore, as well as our good schools, are what attract people to this community. And today we're going to hear about what's happening in our local schools from the superintendents of Rye Neck and Mamaroneck. Before we start, though, Jeff has some tidbits. Nice to see you again.
Listen, if I don't, Maggie's going to give me trouble. Good morning, everybody. Where are those people still sleeping? My tidbit is going to be a little different today. Usually it's on some historical thing, or a couple months ago I did a thing on neighborhoods and subdivision maps and so on. Today it's going to be on people, because we have three important people that affect our communities who passed away in the last 2 months. I want to read sort of a mission statement that the summit has. It's a volunteer community organization that works to facilitate dialogue and collaboration among government, schools, nonprofits, businesses, and citizens in order to promote positive change for our tri-municipal community. And actually, it's not tri-municipal. I always say it's four, because I include Rye Neck, and I want to make sure that they're paid attention to. Also, my father said to me one time, it's too bad that a lot of people come to this community, particularly for our schools, but because of what we offer, they work hard, both parents work hard, they put their kids through school, and then they leave. And they never get a chance to contribute to their community, which is too bad, because there's a lot of talent out there. Well, I'm going to talk about three men who stayed and contributed to their community. And the first is easy, because it was one of our own, and that's Bob Hayden, who all of these three men were very successful in their careers and their education. He was a Deerfield Academy, Princeton, Sullivan and Cromwell, all of his life. But when he retired, he became part of the community. He was on the Board of Trustees of Hampton University. He was on the Board of Governors of Ramapo College Foundation. He was on the Dillard Scholarship Committee of UVA Law. But more important than that, he was a vice president of this organization, and he was a great person for At Home on the Sound. And he moderated the popular Current Events Forum. And he was an honoree in 2015. He was a terrific guy. And he leaves his wife behind. He was 84 years old when he died. The second person was a person from Larchmont. By the way, Bob Hayden lived in Larchmont and then moved to Mamaroneck. The next guy, not many people have heard of, except those in the village of Larchmont. And that was a guy named Joe Dorsey, Joseph F. Dorsey. He lived in Larchmont. And later in life, he moved to Mamaroneck, to Rye Neck. He died at 90 years old. He died in March 30th of this year. He was very successful, and he was a financial analyst, came from a family of financial analysts. But one of the things that he did and contributed was that for 17 years, he was the head of the Larchmont Manor Park Society. And as you recall, many of you might, from my tidbits on parks, Larchmont Manor Park is the only park that's not municipally owned or maintained. And it's up to the Larchmont Manor Park Society to raise money and maintain it. And Joe Dorsey worked like crazy to bring that park back to where it is today. It's a public park in the sense that anybody can go there, but it's a private park in the sense that it's run by a private society, not-for-profit society. And he, as I say, he leaves his wife of Sheila, and they were married for 69 years. The last and the most important probably is Eugene Grant, who died in his 100th year. Lived for most of his work life in Orietta. He was well educated. He went to Townsend Harris Hall, which I know because my father went there. It's since closed, or now reopened. It was a feeder system for City College, which was a different place back then. And he went to City College after that, and then the University of Michigan, Columbia Law, and he became involved in real estate and became very successful. There is not a not-for-profit organization in our three communities that hasn't been touched by the grants. Both in their efforts and in their money. We would not have the Emlyn Theater. And in a quiet way, I was at a board meeting last night of LMC-TV, and every single year we got a note from them and money. And you couldn't ask for better. So, work hard, stay here, give money, contribute, use your brains, and you'll live to be a long life. My father did the same. He died at 96, being the village historian and the town historian simultaneously. A couple of local things. Local Live this week is a recorded interviews with the two ladies running for the special election for the state Senate seat held by Mr. Ubiquitous. And a recorded interviews with Shelley Mayer and Julie Killian. And also Friday, we are having a grand opening ribbon cutting of our new temporary quarters in the town center, 6 o'clock. Be there, okay? Friday, this Friday at the town center, you will be amazed at what our studio looks like and what our staff has done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm now going to turn the program over to Sabrina Fiddleman. Sabrina?
Good morning. This is our annual State of the Schools meeting. We do it every year, and the superintendents from both Rye Neck and Mamaroneck Public Schools are always most willing to come and speak with us, and for that we are most grateful. I will spend a few minutes introducing them, and then what will happen is they will each speak for up to 15 minutes and then take questions from the audience. We're going to let them both speak before they take questions from the audience. Dr. Barbara Ferraro assumed the role as Rye Neck Superintendent of Schools in January 2017. Prior to coming to Rye Neck, Dr. Ferraro worked in New York City public and private schools as both a teacher and administrator. Since 1990, Dr. Ferraro served as the principal of Rye Neck High School. In 2000, she was given the dual assignment of Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and High School Principal. She served in that capacity until her appointment to the superintendency last year. During her tenure in the district, programs in STEM and STEAM have grown significantly. A district-wide enrichment program based upon the Renzulli school-wide model was made available to students from elementary school through high school. In February of this year, the Rye Neck community overwhelmingly passed a $27,605,000 capital project. Yeah, plans are now underway to make necessary roof repairs, construct a STEAM wing at the high school, and build a middle school gymnasium. These projects will significantly upgrade the school facilities and greatly enhance educational opportunities for all children of the Rye Neck School District. Dr. Ferraro is honored to be a part of such a forward-thinking school community, and with her, she has Dr. Kimberly Bucci, Assistant Superintendent for Business and Finance today. Thank you for coming, both of you. Dr. Robert Shaps is in his 8th year as Superintendent of Mamaroneck Public Schools. He came to Mamaroneck after serving 4 years as Superintendent in Hastings-on-Hudson and 3 years as Superintendent in Manchester-Essex Regional School District in Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts. You could have found places with easier and shorter names, but no, and lots of M's. During his time in Mamaroneck, Dr. Shaps has worked hard to continuously improve the classroom experience, making teaching and learning the priority, while at the same time limiting annual budget growth. Throughout his tenure, Dr. Shaps has worked hard to attract and retain the highest quality teachers. Teachers come to Mamaroneck because of its professional, collaborative culture. When Dr. Schatz came to speak to the summit in December, he talked about the enrollment growth trends and how enrollment has grown 13% since 2010, or the equivalent of an entire elementary school, 640 students, and the planning that's taking place to accommodate this growth. While having a school system that people want to come to is a good problem to have, it also presents its challenges, says Dr. Schatz. Today, he'll talk about the impact on the budget, the need to add staffing positions to maintain favorable class sizes and meet the needs of all learners. Dr. Schatz grew up in Chicago, Illinois, whew, I can say that one, and graduated from Scarsdale High School. He and his wife, Kathy, have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. And I will turn the meeting over to the 2 of you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity. Oh, okay. Again, good morning, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the summit concerning the Rye Neck Schools budget. Okay. Okay, of course. I'm just going to have to do this a little bit differently then. That's okay. And Dr. Bucci and I will talk together about our budget, but I'd like to begin and just inform you that, as you well know, when the community comes to vote on May 15th, they will see a budget that has had a lot of time spent, careful planning. Expenses change from year to year, and there are a lot of moving parts that contribute to the school budget. This school budget for Rye Neck represents careful and prudent planning over time. The 2018-19 Rye Neck proposed budget is a tax cap compliant and does not exceed the tax cap levy. This is the 7th year in a row that the Rye Neck budget is within the tax cap. A couple of facts about our Rye Neck budget. It's a budget that continues our commitment to a personalized education program, K through 12. It represents efficient resource management, and it has, within it, research-based learning initiatives for students. A number of initiatives in our school district this year have been the Balanced Literacy Program that has begun in our Daniel Warren School, which is our K-1-2 school, beginning in the kindergarten and moving through our 5th grade into our F.E. Bellows School. In Rye Neck, if you're not aware of the way our configuration is, it's somewhat of a Princeton plan. K-1-2 school, a 3-4-5 school, a middle school, which is 6 through 8, and then a traditional high school, 9 through 12. The middle school and the high school share a campus at the northern end of our community. This year's budget is a $41 million budget. It takes into account enrollment increases, which are now at the middle high school campus. The enrollment has moved up to the middle high school campus. Our staffing changes are represented in this budget and are, as I said before, a result of long-term planning for enrollment and programmatic changes. Also represented are increases in staffing due to mandates, special education, expansion of the STEAM courses that we mentioned before, and TAs for children with special educational needs. Also in here are some security enhancements, and we're all thinking a lot about security these days, so we've continued to upgrade our security within our school districts. We'll talk a little bit more about the details, but within the budget, the staffing differences, we've added a full-time monitor at each of our elementary schools. We've had a part-time monitor there, so we decided that that was important. In addition, we've upgraded all of our communication systems throughout the district. The budget preserves a number of things. Favorable class size. So what does that mean for Rye Neck? For Rye Neck, it means in our elementary schools from 20 to 22, 23 students. It offers an expansion of STEAM courses and extracurricular activities. The budget also supports a robust music and art program K through 12. This is a commitment that the district has made many years ago to support arts with the expertise of specialists in our elementary schools through our high schools. A rich athletic program. It maintains a full-day kindergarten. Oftentimes, when we look at our budget, we look at things that are not mandated. Of course, full-time kindergarten is not mandated, but Rye Neck school districts enjoy a long tradition of full-time kindergarten and believe there's an importance in that, so we continue that. We maintain our support staff. And again, each year when we look at budget, we look at what we need in each of our schools. And when I say we maintain our support staff, what I'm referencing are nurses in each of our buildings, psychologists in each of our buildings, counselors in each of our buildings, and guidance directors that are K through 12. We meet and exceed all state mandates, as most of the schools do here in our region. The budget changes. The budget change this year equals about $1 million. It's an increase over last year. And the estimated tax rate change for Rye City, 1.58%. For Rye Town, minus 2.25%. So the challenge for Rye Neck, and I know I mention this each time I speak to you, is that we sit in 2 municipalities. So our challenge is the effects of the equalization and assessment rates. And much of that is explained in our budget, which is online. And another thing that we offer our community online is a tax estimator, so you can go online and estimate your taxes for the coming year. Our whole budget is up and presented online. I'd like to take a few minutes now for Dr. Bucci and I to have some dialogue about some of the other pieces that I've given you a snapshot. We'd like to dig into some of perhaps the security measures.
Yes, absolutely. Couple of the things that we had heard from the public and in our public hearings and even before that was a concern about safety measures in the wake of Parkland. And as Dr. Ferraro had alluded to, some of the things that we're doing are really their physical access to the building, so it's security in terms of getting into the building. It's looking at the perimeters of the building. It's looking at the fencing. It's looking at supervision that happens outside. It's looking at the staff that we have assigned out there. And then additionally, we partner with law enforcement and we go through exercises in terms of, the best practices in school safety security measures these days, and those do change over time from one incident to the next. So what we're doing is we're partnering with law enforcement, we're doing those type of drills, and we're, as you can imagine, in every facet of our lives, technology is changing. Well, that's also changing in terms of school technology. We're at the point where we have, card access. Everyone's familiar with that type of stuff when you're going into a school building. But the other thing that they're doing is, we're phasing in the ability to do a lockdown, to communicate with, law enforcement, to have video cameras. We have video cameras. What we're looking to do is to be able to have lockdowns in any of our building at any given point from a mobile phone. So those are the type of things that we're phasing in. This budget supports all of that. So we have the technology piece, we have the physical access, and what we're committed to doing, as Dr. Ferraro mentioned, is working with that support staff. We have a very great student to guidance counselor ratio, student to psychologist ratio, and as you hear some of these discussions about what could be done differently and in the wake of Parkland and the other type of shootings, it's really about getting a connection to the students and understanding where you're going to have that ability to diagnose an issue where it's coming and have students go and feel safe and talk to someone and say, I think there's a problem here. And we have that. We work with professional training with all of our staff, to let them know, to alert them to issues so the staff training is ongoing, and we're committed to maintaining those ratios and improving them over time, and also improving the training.
Yes, exactly. I think that was a major part of our budget this year, and just really maintaining what we have and enhancing the security measures as we move forward. Our elementary schools, as you know, particularly our F.E. Bella School, it's on the Boston Post Road, so as you drive north on the Boston Post Road, you see it. So parents have had some concern about the openness of that campus, so that's one of the campuses where a lot of this work will be done, just to cordon off some of the areas for the children. In the meantime, until we get there, if you drove past at any lunchtime, right now you'd see some temporary barriers that have gone up just to explain that children are out there at that time and there's no cross traffic or pedestrian traffic moving through there. So that's one of our campuses that's gaining a lot of focus right now.
And just in terms of wrapping up our budget numbers, our tax numbers, Dr. Ferraro mentioned, Rye Town is decreasing. The tax rate per thousand is decreasing 2.25. Rye City, a very small portion of our municipality, about 25%, is going up 1.58. Our budget to budget is going up 3.13, and the spending increase it's 1.2 million, and it's primarily predicated on an increase of debt service. The community was generous in supporting the school district's initiative with two bonds that just this past February for $27.6 million. We'll be phasing in that debt service. So what you're seeing in the spending is that debt service being rolled in. And in addition, we have had some changes in our special ed. That happens to various school districts from time to time. What we're looking at is an increase in the number of special ed students that we have, and also the type of placements that they're going to require for next year. So this budget is responsive to that, as well as the staffing that those students require. And then the budget also builds in the pension system contributions that all school districts are required, and there was a slight bump up on the teachers' retirement side. So we're seeing that. So there's a few, maybe 3 or 4 main drivers of the increase this year. So thank you.
Yes, and any questions, please, for us?
The West
Yes.
at the end.
Absolutely. Oh, certainly, not a problem.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I begin, I just want to recognize our board members who are here. We have our board president, Melanie Gray, who's here. I want to just congratulate Melanie, who will be stepping off the board after a long career. And Lynette is here to let you know that there's a life after board service, right? Also, Rena Beater, board trustee, and Sari Winter is here as well, and Debbie Minetta, director of communications. So thank you for being here, and thank you again for your service. So it's a pleasure to be here to talk about our budget, and I always say to our community members, the budget really represents an articulation of our community values, what we want in our public school, and our aspirational goals. And so I want to start off, talk about a point of pride. Last Friday, a group of high school teachers went to Central Connecticut to pick up 4 beehives. We are going to host and be the first public school in New York State to take care of, and in some ways, be stewards of 4 beehives, with the idea of an interdisciplinary study between our culinary arts teacher, our Kathy O'Reilly, our science department chair, who really is a strong proponent of the study of bees, and our research students who really want to start to understand what's happening to our bee population, declining bee population, as well as this hive mentality. So we were excited by that. None of our students were stung yet, and in all seriousness, we have to think the worst and hope for the best, but it really is exciting. We're happy to have this opportunity. I wanted to start also just talk about our budget as we do by the numbers, because we have a lot of wonderful statistics about the programs we offer and the experience our students in participating each day. So with this budget, we will celebrate having close to 300 of our elementary students in grades K through 5 participate in a dual language program starting in September. So it'll be the first time for the school system that we've had a cohort from kindergarten to 5th grade. And now the challenge next year is to really bring our stakeholders together to talk about what the middle school continuation would look like. But we're going to have almost more than a third of the students at MAS participating in a dual language program, so that's exciting. We currently, through this budget, support 85% of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students enrolled in orchestra and band. And it's really remarkable to think that close to 1,600 students are picking up an instrument every day and focusing on becoming part of an ensemble or proficient, whether it's the trombone, the trumpet, or the violin. We have, after 5 years of community's investment, 15% of our high school students enrolled in computer science courses, which is remarkable. Our team next month of underwater robotics will go up to Cape Cod and participate against MIT. Last year, they were the rookies of the year in the competition, and we're hoping for a national placement this year for underwater robotics. We enjoyed, and we hope to continue, 188 class trips to Sheldrake Environmental Center. I think it's remarkable that we have such an incredible community resource in our backyard. And so having students do science, authentic science, by going out to where science happens each day is a wonderful experience, and this board supports that. This year, in a few weeks, we'll have 720 students participate in capstone inquiry projects. So we want our students to ask big questions and then to really go forward and take the time to become an expert and share their findings with their peers and the community. And so we look forward to the opportunity to invite the community in to find out what they've learned. My favorite from a few years ago is from a question that a 5th grader posed about what part of inside trading is okay. So we really push boundaries, and we let them go where they want to go. We have this year, and continuing with, again, support of taxpayers, we'll have 500 of our second through fifth grade students participating with Finch robots. So they're programming robots, and they're working through the algorithms to understand the future of what is the potential of having machines work for you, and that's something we really appreciate. And finally, this year, we through the support of the budgets, we piloted a original civics research program, a multi-year course for Joel Liberty. This idea is, how do students start to get civically engaged? That is, to understand their community and to really work to help and support change. And so we'll have, between our original science students and our new ninth graders, we'll have about 150 students doing what I call original research that will become public, and we're thrilled by that. So that gives you a sense of what we believe in, what we support, and what we and certainly it's been terrific that the community, that is over 78% of our community members who have decided to vote, have voted in favor of this budget, really for the last 7 years in our last 7 budgets. And so we're hoping for the same level of support. Early in the year, I had the opportunity to talk to you about our system challenge, the challenge of both enrollment and space. And I was happy that we had such a large number of community members who signed up for our long-range planning, our enrollment task force. We had 96 applicants, and we have 38 members of our community who are willing to roll up their sleeves. The reality is we've tried to look at this both in the near term and long term in terms of possible strategies and options to give us time to understand what's going to happen next. The reality is, as you heard in the introduction, we've seen tremendous growth over the last 7 years, 13%, or roughly 640 students more than we expected in 2018. And that we said that's equal to one of our elementary schools in terms of student population. So what does that translate relative to the budget? Well, this year, we're asking our citizens, our community, to support an override, that we are, through this budget, trying to what I call right-size the district. We've had not only tremendous increase to our kindergarten cohorts each year for the last several years, but we've seen significant growth across the system. So our middle school started 2 years ago at 1,150 students, and we're well over 1,300 students and counting. Our high school is at about 1,450 students, and now is well over 1,600. It should expect to go into 1,700. So part of what we're trying to do through this budget over really of a 2-year period is to right-size our staffing to maintain class size, favorable class size across the system. The budget includes 20.9 FTEs. We talk about FTEs as full-time equivalent positions, and that really supports all areas of need. Elementary positions for elementary section, middle school staff, we're going to add a half a team to accommodate our 6th and 7th graders, and high school as well, as students are taking more and more courses and we have a higher enrollment. We also are adding special ed staff as we see an increase in the number of students who are eligible for student support services. We take great pride in the range of programs that we have in our district because we really believe and support the idea of least restrictive environment and meeting the needs of each and every student, and that's really important to us. So the big news here is about the enrollment and our response to that. Not knowing the future, that is all the challenging fiscal challenges we have in front of us, whether it's from the federal level or within the state, and the concerns of how we can plan accordingly. And so we're looking for support from all of you to allow us to be able to maintain and invest in the programs we enjoy and our reputation. The budget, if I can just say, is growing budget to budget by $3.8 million. We are putting forward a budget of $138.9 million. It represents a 2.84% budget to budget increase. I want to say, and I've talked about it publicly, that part of what confounds us is the arbitrary nature of the tax cap law. And I'm not going to get into it too far, but it's amazing to me that if we were under the cap this year, we would have grown our budget, even under the cap, higher than last year when we were over the cap. We have districts that are north of here who are growing their tax levy by 4-5%. They're under the cap, and our tax levy growth is 3.97, and we're over the cap. So it really doesn't account for an understanding of a consistent way of thinking about budgets. And the second part of it it's really unsettling is that there is no factor for enrollment growth. There is no factor at state aid for enrollment growth, and there's no factor or any type of multiplier in this formula for student enrollment growth. And I want to say that we all know that programs, staffing, and enrollment are tied together. That what drives your budget when you have 80 to 85% of your costs for salaries and benefit is that there is an enrollment factor that should be considered. And so it confounds me that as we think about our situation and the additional students, that there is no type of recognition for the cost that it takes to educate more children and maintain the quality of your school system. And so I have to say that's problematic, and to the extent that we can let our citizens know that our budget is a function of continuing to, our ability to continue to accommodate more children and maintain and invest in the quality of schools, that's the real story of the budget. And I think it's important to kind of at least speak to that overall. The good news, I should say, is that if we think about it, is that this, based on the assessed value, the continuation of the assessed value, the impact on the average assessed home is, for taxes, additional taxes, $111 at $1.25 million. So we understand that this is really a 2-year view of our budget. We want to make sure that we can plan accordingly. We have 485 fourth graders that will enter HOMICS 2 years from now. That will push the middle school higher in total enrollment, and so we need to look at this in multi-year chunks. Behind that, we have 472 second graders. When I first started here, almost 9 out of the 13 grade level cohorts were less than 400 students per grade. Now every cohort in every grade is over 400 students, except for our seniors, who a smaller class of 380 or 90 students are leaving. So you see, we are changing as a school system, and we are trying to, in a very, what I would say, sound financial way, trying to adjust to this, but at the same time maintain the quality of our schools. So we're thrilled to be able to offer the breadth of programs to our students. We're thrilled to be able to accommodate more and more families. We have 31% of our registered families arrived here within the last 3 years. I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to see the Journal News article a few weeks ago about where are all the people from Brooklyn heading. Larchmont is the #1 location in Westchester. So they have migrated here north, and here we are. So again, I would be happy to answer, as Barbara and Kim would say, questions you have. But I ask you to take the time to learn about the budget, to really understand the factors that and the challenges and the system challenges we face, and make sure that you're informed so you, when it comes to May 15, you can engage in that democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you all, and I think if you don't mind, what I'll ask you to do is I'll ask people for questions, and if you don't mind repeating the questions so that for posterity, LMC-TV can pick up the questions as well as the answers, that would be great. Okay, questions? Bill.
Thank you all. Dr. Shafts, with your comments just now, and these would pertain to the others as well, but in particular, you talk about factors for enrollment growth. What is that? What would that be? What would that look like? I mean, even as you laid that out, you followed it with some, startling figures. It's 31% over the past 3 or 4 years, and so you do very well to kind of pose this and present this to us. But I'm wondering what it would look like. In the calculus of what we do in the local community, where our public schools are of great importance to us, you really are laying out some, very particular things that you guys, the board too, live with in some rather distinct ways. But I guess, unless I missed it, I didn't hear what might be a formula or a calculus for a factor for enrollment growth as we go forward. Now that's a you know, bottom line
Well,
question.
Okay, I'll start off by saying, sure, I think if I got it right, what's causing or what is really behind the fact that we're growing as a school system? Is that, did I?
Well, you know, we can talk about that, but I'm just saying in terms of going forward with matters of public policy, public financing, and the like. You know,
Oh.
what might be a calculus or rubric for that? I mean, is it a wild card, or is there something that might be posed in terms of?
Well, I think it is to some extent a wild card. I mean, we were not planning for this level of change. As a matter of fact, all the professional information and the background we had around enrollment change over time was that we were going to see a declining enrollment, steadily declining enrollment for a period of 11 years. So I would maybe turn things around if I can. Last night we had the opportunity to have our task force to meet with an architect who is redefining what how we look at physical space through building schools across the globe, 48 countries. And I think what we're trying to, in some ways, instill and excite our community about is to say, how can we think different about the idea of educating students for the future? That is, the variables or the factors of physical space, of how we group students, how we use time, who are the learners, and what is the role of the teacher. So I think this is an important point in the history of our school system and our community, because it can't just be about brick and mortar and thinking about these issues. What I can say is using an industrial lens, that, you know, we have buildings that have been around for 125 years, we divide them into sections, we do that, we add staff, we deal with issues that are over and over again the same thing. So I would say that the way we have to think about all of this, all the factors that we're experiencing, is to say, what do we believe in? What do we value? What do we want to create? What are we preparing students for? And then how do we bring all that together as a community and come to some kind of consensus of the path forward? So I actually think it's an exciting opportunity to think differently about what I would say existing problems and challenges, and be creative in our response for our kids in the future. So.
Yes, I would concur. I think what we need to do is not what we've done in the past. So as Dr. Schaap said, as things start to change, we have to ask ourselves the question, do we need to change with it? And what would those changes look like? And it is, you use the phrase wild card. In some ways it is. We never know who's going to enter our community. And the research tells us one thing, and then the reality turns out to be something different. We don't know about the growth, what's going to happen, when the community will completely turn over, when, you know, there will be new houses. We're a little fortunate in Rye Neck because there's not a lot of building going on, and we're rather a little small. So therefore, our population has remained stable, and we could predict a little bit, but we don't know about the move-ins who are coming in, where they're going to be, and what the special needs of the children might be. So all of that is a somewhat, if you'd like to use the phrase, a wild card as we move forward. But we keep our options open. And I think we always ask ourselves the question, what are we doing? Are we doing it correctly? Do we need to do something differently? And that dialogue is ongoing with our boards and our community.
I had a question on behalf of a friend who couldn't be here. She wanted to know if the busing issue, and that we took it away for private schools, if that factored into it at all. That was the question she had.
Is that for you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It has to do with busing, it has to do with us. The simple answer is no. I mean, you know, everybody made predictions as to what, you know, will happen if we change our transportation policy. And I would say that there's been no evidence in any way or data to say that that has influenced or been the cause as to why our enrollment has gone up. It's interesting because we do track and analyze our enrollment change across the year and then over time. And as I said, 31% of our families are registered in the last 3 years, and that's been more of a function of people selling their homes and people moving in. We've seen the most significant area growth in the village of Larchmont. I know that Murray and Chatsworth have been certainly growing in their school populations. Chatsworth is really, and Murray are both almost at full capacity relative to their enrollment and space. So the short answer is no, it has not been impacted at all.
So one time I had seen the numbers of students that were in our community that went to private school, and it was high in the high school, but So you're saying those numbers are static,
They've
even
been
though we got rid of the busing?
Yes, it's been about 10, 11% of our total student population. It hasn't changed, and I don't think it's going to change. Matter of fact, we have a lot more students for different reasons who go out of state to school, come back from private school settings and decide to return to the public schools. So I think but it's more a function of just the natural course of things. There's got to be more questions.
Yeah, come on. What?
Yes. Good.
Hi, Dr. Shafts. I have a ninth grader and an 11th grader in the high school. And my ninth grader is doing the original civics research at 7 a.m. 3 times a week, and he's loving it. So that's good. Thank you for bringing that in. I guess my question is, what would you do more of, and what programs don't make it in because of budget limitations? So let's say, if you had $1 million, what programs would you include, or what do you already have that you would expand?
So, and I want to provide Barbara the opportunity to answer as well. So there's a lot of things we would like to include, and it doesn't necessarily translate necessarily to money. I think, that always helps, and I say it's interesting. Our neighbors to, I think it's the north, Scarsdale, they have about 700 less students than we have in Mamaroneck, and they spend $18 million more in their budget than we, so the Mamaroneck, just to give you a perspective. So if you said you want to write a check for $18 million, what can I do with it? I can tell you a whole lot in terms of program and people. But in all seriousness, we are very efficient with our per pupil expenditures. We have one of the lowest. We are below the median for per pupil expenditures in Westchester, which speaks to what I would say is our fiscal responsibility around the growth of our budget on an annual basis and the growth of enrollment, and that is a factor of it. But we actually have seen pretty much our per pupil expenditures remain constant in the last 5 years. But what's really excites us now about what's possible, what's missing, I would say, is the connections to students' experiences that are across disciplines. In other words, so one of the things about the civic research or the original science research is it creates opportunities to do inquiry, to become an expert on their own, to work in an authentic setting. So really to continue with their learning outside the walls of the school, out in an area where some other experts are doing the same work. It provides an opportunity for them to work on their communication skills, so they have to translate what they know and share that publicly, whether it's a formal presentation, a paper, or in some kind of formatting, some modality. So that's another thing. And they have to get to work with other people, which is a skill that really is going to stay with them for the rest of their professional and adult lives. And so it's how do we think of the connections in preparing students for the jobs we don't know they're going to face. Yesterday we talked about how businesses are looking at school systems to partner because there's a shortage of workers for the future, and they're thinking if they can help reinvent schools in a way that speaks to the qualities and knowledge bases that they want their employees to have, then they've created that pathway for those individuals. What I appreciate about the high school is that we've created pathways for learning, whether it's culinary arts and food science, whether it's computer science, whether it's engineering. Our engineering students constructed the beehives for our science students who are studying bees. And so it's making those connections across disciplines and thinking about what I would say the skills that students will need that really is what we're focusing on now. So it's really understanding how are the generations that come forward learning and engaging the world differently. How do we move away from just learning content, because right now we can just Google right now on anything we want to know and find out. It's really the application of knowledge, and that's what we're really getting after.
Thank you. And I'd like to expand upon that a little bit. So to answer the question that you pose, what would you do if, that's a simple answer. If with more money, we can do more things. So when I think about Rye Neck, a couple of things come to mind. But before I make a decision, I have to be aware of the parameters. And we're constrained by time and by space. So those are some issues. So one of the things that we are doing with our capital project is expanding the space. And as I expand the space, I'll be able to introduce more programs for our students, particularly in the STEAM activities up at the middle high school. That's one of the things. But more concretely, I would like to expand the offerings in world languages for our students. When we think about the global world we live in, I'd like to expand that. We start languages in our school in 6th grade, and we offer Spanish, Italian, and French. I would like to expand that if I had more opportunity and more time to do that. Something else that has been a hallmark of our schools for a very long time, and something I'm proud of because it started when I was principal of the high school. We have a well-established intern program in our high school. It actually will begin on Monday for all the seniors. It's now in its 22nd year. Every one of our seniors will go out into our community and work for the last quarter of the year, supervised obviously by their teachers, and that's connected to the curriculum. It is every one of our students, and it's a remarkable opportunity for students and for community as well, because we partner with our community members who come back into the schools and are there for the final projects that the students present to us. What I would like to do with something like that is push down that community connection into other grades, perhaps start some of that in a junior year, if possible, with more connections that would lead to the research that students are doing. We are also connected with the League of Women Voters in Rye Town, and what we do there is we work with our students on special research projects in the community, and that's been ongoing with an association with Duke University for probably 5 years now. So I would like to expand those kinds of opportunities for our students. As Dr. Schaap said, it's those connections outside of the school walls. We are not just a school within the walls of our buildings. We are a school within our community and in the communities in which we live. So our students need to be integrated into that with opportunities that help them grow, help them inquire, help them have creative solutions to the problems, and maybe I'm referencing your first question, maybe to the problems that we don't even know exist yet, but we'd like our kids to ask the questions and start to investigate them. So anytime we can reach out, whether it's with our business community, our colleges and universities around in the area, and our neighbors at large, that will help our kids. So that's what more money would do for me, and I'm looking forward to our building project, which will bring in more opportunities for our students.
I just want to add one thing in response to your question as well. We, the community, over the last 2 years invested in our capital work to improve our PE health areas of instruction at the high school. And I think that investment is key in thinking about how we can spark some innovation and prepare our students for the future. Because now we have a variety of learning spaces, and now we want to match that with how do we individualize and for each child a year's worth of health and PE so that it's not delivered in the same ways. In other words, how is the investment in the space from the community going to help us think differently about how students can learn? So high school students starting part of their program at the middle school to swim before school starts, having individualized time not in their schedule to meet their standards for performance outcomes and not have it in their schedule. They're just having gym every other day as they used to do. So it is taking that investment, is thinking differently. The other thing I want to point out, you asked, what if we had $1 million to spend? I also want to say, in terms of this budget, what would happen if this budget is defeated and we have to go back to a budget that is under the cap or a contingency budget? And just so you understand, to give you a sense of magnitude, if the budget would go to a default budget, that is to go through 2 iterations with a defeat, we would have to eliminate $4.7 million for this budget, which is equivalent to 50 teaching positions, eliminating 50 teaching positions, or about 10% of our staff. To reduce this budget to get under the cap, we would have to cut $1.4 million from this budget. And again, it's roughly 15 teaching positions that we'd have to eliminate. So the stakes are high relative to the investment through this budget, and it's really both sides of the coin here in terms of what do you get from supporting the budget versus what will be removed if we do not build the support we need to have it.
Good morning, thank you. I have a particular interest in what used to be called vocational education. My daughter, the lawyer, is married to a plumber. and he's a very important member of our family. I know that some of what we would call vocational education now is through BOCES, which I understand at least used to take the students out of the system, out physically, and move them someplace else. So there was always a question of their involvement with the school community. Have there been any changes in thinking about this kind of real need for people entering the trades?
Certainly. Yes, the question is, what consideration have we been given to students who might be interested in entering the trades? Well, we begin the foundation in all of our schools, because in order for a student to move into one of the trades, we have to develop those critical thinking skills, those analytical skills that they need, and that's all woven into the curriculum. That's important because things have changed. What I remember from vocational ed and what is vocational ed today is somewhat different. Technology is an important part of everything we do. So our students need to identify problems, be able to solve problems, and be able to use the tools necessary to solve those problems, and in 2018 those tools involve technology. So we start with those kinds of thinking and basic skills. We start not in high school, we start at the beginning of a student's education so that they begin to ask those essential questions, solve those problems. You've heard a little bit about that today, and then as we move forward, we begin to move those children into the areas in which they want to specialize. BOCES is still what Rye Neck uses for much of that, but as I mentioned before, more of that will go out into the field. What we look forward to is having the students have the basic foundation skills learned in their school, move to the technical skills perhaps through a BOCES program, but then grow those skills as they work in the field alongside a master. And that's the movement of internships and other programs like that. So right now, in 2018, that's how Rye Neck addresses those issues, but it is important, and it's recognized by the state that career education is, career and technical education is a very important part of what students do. So we don't really call it vocational education anymore, career and technical education.
I'm sorry. Reverend Hank should come ahead. All right, right after me then. In terms of this education and civics training, I was very interested in two of the comments from your two women, and a connection to the League of Women Voters.
Correct.
That's fascinating. And the degree that the children feel safe in the schools in terms of the Parkland situation. I want to give a genuine compliment from everything we learned at the last summit meeting about what the schools are doing to help children feel safe. And the students we had in our program stated clearly that they felt the schools were really helping them feel safe. My question is, has there been any further impact in working with your civics departments in training, being sure that government and the whole issue of voting, these students have taught us adults a great deal about what we've done wrong, I feel, and they are incredible kids, and you can be so proud of the ones. One spoke from Rye Neck on LMC-TV, and then we had others come. And my sense of what they can tell us, to me, this is just an incredible thing. And is there you have one teacher that takes students up to primaries. I know that in the high school. I believe he was at a League of Women Voters event, which was a great one last Friday. So my whole concern is, how much are the students helping engender more concern about teaching civics and how to really express oneself and lead us in areas that are so important?
I can start, and I'll hand this over to Dr. Schaps. You hit on a lot of the points that are happening. It's student-led, and the students are taking the movement now and moving it forward. There are things we've typically done by getting our seniors, as they age into voting age, registered to vote. But what happened in Parkland really sparked an interest. It changed the tide for students. I've seen the students, certainly at our high school, being more vocal, being more involved, creating movement, and taking it and pushing it down. It's peer-to-peer, and they are really the leaders of our district. For us in Rye Neck, that comes out of our Student Senate, which is facilitated by our Social Studies chairperson, who is very involved in the community. So it happens in different ways in different communities, but the way it really takes hold and has a difference is when it's student to student, and we're seeing that in our school. I'm sure you're seeing the same in Mamaroneck right now.
So I just want to say that last week we had close to 100 of our AP government students travel to Washington, as they typically do, to really observe government in real time. They spent the day on the Hill focusing on immigration. And they were working with senators and congressmen from across the country, sitting in hearings, meeting lobbyists and so forth, and really seeing how the government works down in Washington. At the same time, as you know, many of the same students are understanding what it means to involve themselves in the political process locally, regionally, and statewide. We talked about and expect in November again to go to a lot of battleground states around national elections and have students replicate what they've done in New Hampshire for the last 2 presidential campaigns. That is to get into what I would say retail politics and see how to affect change just by doing and observing. At the same time, I think it's important because I think the board is representative of how we can build community and model the appropriate civic engagement in our own backyard. I am very concerned by the tone and tenor of our public conversations. It seems in many respects that what has happened to our country nationally has reverberated at a local level, where even in our meetings and in our public meetings, that the way we engage each other is not modeling for the next generation. What does it mean to be respectful in different opinions? How do we convey our concerns? How do we deal with problems in such a way that we maintain a level of respect, civility, and in some ways let that process unfold? So I think the biggest lesson for our students is to model the type of discourse we want them to lead in the future. And I mean that sincerely. It seems that, you know, when you're a public official, that it gives license in some respects to challenge views and challenge possible solutions to difficult problems. And I think we need to remind ourselves and step back that we are all one community. We live here, we work here, we want what's best, and how do we engage in conversations about difficult choices? Because it's not about always easy solutions, but remain respectful and model that kind of discourse we want for the future.
Am I next? Hi. Both my kids were educated at Rye Neck, and they're both very successful, doing very well, and we're very pleased with what happened there. Unfortunately, that was a while ago, so I've not totally kept up, but Dr. Ferraro, I remember her very well. My question is, there's a big debate going on in this country about education, whether you're talking about the Trump administration and Betsy DeVos, is that her name? And the whole question between charter schools, public schools. In every campaign, there's an argument over what's happening with education in this country. And then my question is simply this: I hear you saying that with more money, and I understand that you could do more, and we would like more languages in our school. We always want more. The mothers and fathers in my church are booked to the gills. They are taking their kids everywhere. They're taking lessons, doing this, doing that. How do we stand on a world level, and how do we compete on a world level? I travel a lot. I know there's a lot of students from around the world, especially parts of the Middle East and other places, that want to come here and be educated. On the other hand, I also hear that there is a lot of competition in this world. How are we gauged? How would you gauge the way we're competing and addressing that?
So I can start. This might take some time, but I'll be mindful of your time. It's a wonderful question, and I think we have to ask ourselves, what are the measures that we hold ourselves to relative to gauging, are we successful? Are we preparing students? I will say one thing, because one of the I think, points of pride in our school system is we have one of the oldest Mandarin programs of a public school in the United States since the 1970s through the Ford Foundation. And our students have been fortunate enough to go to China each year, live with host families, go to Shanghai Experimental School, Beijing 101, and see how a broader world looks like in terms of those students who they compete against. And I'll say one thing. For many respects, I have no problem with setting and defining outcomes and measures and accountability that came out of the No Child Left Behind. That is the idea of how do you hold public school accountable, or in some ways measure the outcome, the value added from the institution. The one thing I'll say, though, is that most of the most successful countries around the world have tried to emulate the school systems that we have in our country. So they've moved away from what I would say is the test-taking culture that we've grown in the last decade to really aspire to, and have tried to build schools that allow for failure, allow for students to practice, allow for students to really have a balanced education, to become the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, the remarkable individuals that have built the industries that are now fueling this world economy, that they've recognized in China and in other countries, that just teaching to a test, that really thinking about producing good test takers is not going to produce the entrepreneurs, the people who imagine what's possible and are willing to risk things for failure. And so that entrepreneurial spirit that is indicative of our community, our economy, our country, that sense of individualism, the sense of choice, those are important components of an educational system that has had great results. Now, that being said, at the same time, over the last 20 years, we've seen from having 75% of our engineering degrees come from the United States to reverse down to about 25%. And so the idea is, how do we demand the rigor and the expectations from the beginning? And that's the investment in early education and really giving kids a great start to ensure the high standards we want for all going forward. The difference from the American system and what other world systems, when you start to do comparisons, is not all children have access to public schools. Our belief system is everybody is welcome through that door, and we make and adjust to the challenges of who are the learners, where are they at, and what needs they have, and how do we get everyone to be successful. So there's a distinction there, but I would say this. I'm very optimistic about what the public school has to offer, about the future. I think the critical piece is we need to be clear on what we value, what the outcomes look like, and start to convince all stakeholders about this transformation. Because I think I would say is, if we believe that we'll be here as an institution 15 years from now because the brick and mortar has been here for 150 years, I think that's short-sighted. We need to reimagine and redesign ourselves. But we need to agree on outcomes and be able to demonstrate that to our stakeholders in order to ensure that our students are competitive in this world economy and have the skills to be successful. So I think it's actually investing in more of what we believe in, the entrepreneurism, authentic learning, problem solving, critical thinking, the things we talk about, and not focusing on test measurements and teaching to test and creating a generation of kids who can answer simple questions or complicated questions because we've been giving it to them over and over again. So creativity is an incredible part of our product, and we want to make sure that we harness that creativity for all children.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add to that a little bit. To answer the question, I have a simple response, and then I'd like to expand upon it. It's our job. It's our job to ensure that students are prepared when they leave us, but how do we do that? Well, we do that by understanding the research, keep ourselves current, working with our staff and continuing to develop the staff and asking them to be aware of the world around them. It's about education and it's about growing and learning and awareness. But as we do that, we look at specifics for our students. And one of the things that Dr. Schaps mentioned, which kind of is what I was saying when I talked about the internship program, authentic learning. So what we really want to do is involve our kids in authentic learning and what does that mean and what does that look like. We also are aware of what the world is like, and we want to move our young women particularly into the sciences and engineering. That's a kind of a field where many times the women are not as well represented as they need to be. So that's something else that we're doing in our schools. But it's important for us to just understand the changes and not to have those blinders on. And as school leaders, it's our job to help our teachers be open-minded like that as well, because of course those are the first line. They're working with our students every day. And reimagining our schools, kids learn differently. Learning is going on 24/7 for all of us. Our children are learning differently. They're not learning from 8 to 3 any longer. They're learning all day long. So how are we going to harness that and help our kids to be aware of what's going on in the world and be ready for the changes, be adaptable as things change? Because we put up something every time, thinking of our science department, who oftentimes does a presentation for the board, and they put something up, well, we're preparing our kids today for jobs that don't exist. And we don't even know what they're going to be when they're ready, and they're ready to enter the world of work. And that's kind of resonates with me right now. So knowing that and embracing that, then I ask, what do we have to do in our schools? And what we have to do in our schools is be open-minded and be responsive to the changes that are going on and help everyone else, parents and kids and teachers, to understand that and be ready and be aware of what's going on. Do you want to add?
The only thing I want to add is it's also about the whole child. We are talking about preparing students to be able to be successful in the future and on many levels. And part of that is socially. Part of that is within the structure of relationships, of working collaboratively with fellow workers, being a part of a community, and be able to engage in a way that really speaks to the heart and the mind. And so it's not just about the academic piece. It's their ability to be well-adjusted adults. And I think that's something that's important to us. And that's why you've seen so much about the investment in emotional intelligence and social emotional well-being and a growth mindset. In this idea of testing things out in a safe environment where they can become productive adults. And that's what we hope for as well. So it's that balance between the two.
Hi, I'm a parent of a first grader in the Mamaroneck School District. We've heard a lot about the great programs in the upper schools for going across the country and to other countries, and a lot of cultural and civic exploration. And we've also heard a lot about the rise in enrollment. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what we are doing in our elementary schools to ensure that teachers have the ability to provide the individualized education that's necessary to establish the fundamentals and the cultural and civic involvement that you've all been talking about.
I think we take a systems view. So we are a school system of 4 elementary schools. We invest in creating a professional culture that has a level of consistency, whether it's what are the best practices in math instruction, literacy, and making sure that the system is really well established in all 4 of our schools, but down to the level of the granular of the classroom. We invest in instructional coaches. We have an instructional literacy and math coach. We have created a literacy ambassador position that is working on providing ample resources for each and every teacher. We focus on book matching and really meeting the progress and growth of elementary students in their reading all along the way. We've invested in what we call K-Lift, and we instead of responding to how learners go through first, second, and third grade as emerging readers, we've actually ensured that our reading teachers come into kindergarten and push into the classroom in all of our kindergarten, and we focus on basic proficiency literacy skills and mathematics in the kindergarten first year experience. I think we like to say that there is curriculum consistency, there's instructional consistency, and the final component to that is we have a very fluid supervision model. We conduct over 3,600 classroom observations in a year of our 489 teachers. In the elementary level, we have going in from the central office to the building administrators and visiting classrooms and providing teachers with immediate written and oral feedback about an aspect of their practice, and we come back the next day or the next week and continue that conversation. We strongly believe that it is all about teacher quality, and that the investment in quality teaching is what is really going to support students at the elementary level. And then it's really about that balanced experience, whether it's the art, the music, whether it's dual language, whether it's library. So I feel very proud of what we've created within the professional confines of our school environments. what we ask teachers to do and how we give them the opportunity to test out and practice their craft in order to improve instruction and talk about it. So I don't know. It's less about the enrollment pressures. It's more about the quality of teaching and learning. And so I think...
How can we maintain that quality of teaching and learning with expanding class sizes and less time per teacher to spend with each individual child?
So my first response to that is our median class size in the elementary last year was 22.2 students per class. Our median in mode a class size average next year will be 22 students. So we've been able to hold on to the average class size in our elementary schools, which I'm comfortable with, which is comparable to Rye Neck and in surrounding districts. Again, I think we need to spend less time in focusing on one or two students changing the dynamics in the classroom and looking at the quality of instruction that we expect and the progress of our students in meeting the individual needs of each and every child. And that's the approach we have. Our teachers know our students well, our administrators know our students well, and our central office know children well. And that's the beginning and end point for me overall.
Anybody else?
The last one. I'm married to a former Spanish teacher from the Hummocks. She worked at the Hummocks for 22 years. So language has always been a big topic in our household. With all the emphasis these days on STEM program and the like, I wonder, would you talk a little bit about where language skills and the language programs in your schools fit in and what the priorities are?
I'd like to start there because it's where does language fit in? What are the priorities? In Rye Neck, it's very important. And we encourage our students to move through the advanced levels of language. It's important. I would like to see each of our students graduate with facility in another language. I don't have that myself, and I've always found it to be a problem for myself. I think in this world we live in, students need that. And I often say to the students as they're thinking about moving forward and picking courses, it almost doesn't matter what language it is, because language not only gives you the facility of speaking another language, but gives you appreciation of other cultures. And we talked about that a little bit before. So how do we open our kids' minds to the world around them? It's about learning about another culture, and you do that through languages. We're proud that we are able to continue to maintain language through both college levels and the advanced placement through the College Board. So we have a relationship with colleges where students can advance through that, and also with the College Board. Many of our students in the high school are encouraged to take 2 languages. It's really important for us to have that and have kids to graduate with that facility.
Just to add to that, as I said, I started out saying how proud we are that we'll have 300 elementary students participate in a dual language program at our Mamaroneck Avenue School, Spanish, alternating between Spanish and English every day. We offer Mandarin Chinese starting in the middle school, along with French and Spanish all the way through the high school, and it's a big part of our program. We have a number of students who, in the Mandarin program, continue to study Mandarin at the university level and then live or work in China. And so over this 30-plus year program, we've actually seen and tracked the continuing level of how language really is a big part of adult lives of our graduates. And so we're very proud of that, and I echo Barbara's comments that it's a big component of who we are and what we believe in.
Thank you. I want to thank our panel. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to remind everybody that 1 week from today we have a local election, the 24th of April. I urge you to use your franchise and vote. And our next meeting is May 15th. We will be talking about how you can get involved in helping the underserved in our community, what those opportunities are, and how you might make some contribution there too. Are there any other announcements before we leave? Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right.
I just want to say, these guys have so much great stuff to talk about, and we're talking about LMC here. LMC has an amazing database of all of the former meetings. So I confess I have not looked a lot at Rye Necks, but I'm sure your meetings are, as informative as ours. And if you want to know more about dual language or kindergarten lift or any of these different things, you can actually go back, not just see a PowerPoint slides, but you can actually see the presentations. So I encourage you to do that. If there's a particular topic you're interested in, reach out to us and let us know, and we'll help you find it on LMC's website. And thank you, LMC.
Is there anybody else that has an announcement before we leave? Yeah. Mary Lee?
Many of you have this folder, not all, this flyer. This is a program that is an additional one to the 1968 Community Read thing that's going on this month in our two wonderful libraries. Tremendous work has been done on this. This is an extra that Bill Crawford was able to put together: civil rights, voting rights, and social justice, then 1968 and now. And the quality of our speakers, Alexander Forger, some of you may remember, nationally known lawyer, former resident of Larchmont; Marge Lindblom, present resident, well-known lawyer in the area of civil and voting rights; Jeffrey King, longtime resident here, a trustee of the town of Mamaroneck. And we will have some students, these wonderful students I've told you about, will join us the 28th Saturday of April, 2 p.m., Mamaroneck Library. We consider this very special. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great. Anything else before we go? Yes. Diane? Okay.
I just wanted to mention that the Larchmont Mamaroneck Lions are having their annual May Eye Health campaign in the community. In addition to the eye recycling boxes that you've seen, which we're upping, we're also going to have free eye screenings. Raymond's Optician is going to do it on the 8th and the 10th for people 7 and up by appointment, and Apple of Your Eye in Mamaroneck. We have to find the date. And in addition, at the Larchmont Library from 3 to 6, we'll be doing screenings for kids 3 and up with our special Kids Sight camera that screens for certain eye deformities in children too young to read eye charts. So hope you all participate.
Janet?
Sorry, maybe I'll be the last one. Listening to Mary Lee, it made me focus on the fact that our next Drug Take-Back Day is coming up also on April 28th. So for all of you planning to go to the civil rights presentation, come a little bit earlier, right across the street at Larchmont Village lobby. This is at Mamaroneck. Well, there's the opportunity also on your way that direction to stop in at the town of Mamaroneck's police department. Those two locations, we have boxes there that are permanent boxes, so you can drop off anytime you want to. But in observance of the National Day for Drug Take-Back Day, and along with the DEA, we hope that you'll join us in spring cleaning your medicines and helping to keep our kids safe from substance abuse. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. See you next month.